A pale sun hung low in the sky, its light a feeble thing barely piercing the thick haze that clung to the wasteland. Jagged remnants of the old world jutted from the earth. Half-buried skyscrapers, rusted husks of war machines, the skeletal remains of roads leading to nowhere. A dry wind howled through the ruins, carrying the scent of dust, decay, and something sharper, the cold tang of metal. The warrior moved through the desolation with measured steps, his boots crunching over shattered concrete. His rifle was slung across his back, but his hand remained near the worn grip of his sidearm. He had long since learned that danger did not announce itself with the roar of engines or the echo of distant gunfire. No, in the wasteland, death arrived on silent wings, machines watching from the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness. Fenrir padded at his side, a massive, wolf-like beast with sleek black fur interwoven with dull metallic plating. His yellow eyes flickered in the dim light, scanning the landscape with the unwavering vigilance of a predator. The warrior didn't need to speak. A simple glance, a shift in breath, the tension of a muscle. Fenrir understood it all. They had been together too long for words to matter. They moved with purpose, skirting the remains of an old battlefield where rusting drones lay half-buried in the dirt, their optics shattered, their circuitry long dead. The war that had birthed this wasteland was over, but its echoes lingered in every ruined city and poisoned river. Humanity had once ruled the stars. Now, they fought like rats in the rubble, scavenging what little remained. A distant hum made the warrior freeze. His pulse quickened, but he did not move. Fenrir's ears flicked forward, his muscles tensing. The hum deepened into a low drone, mechanical and rhythmic. Recon unit. Small, fast, lethal in the right numbers. The warrior pulled his rifle free, pressing his body into the crumbling remains of a collapsed overpass. Fenrir lowered himself to the ground, melting into the shadows. The drone came into view, a sleek, insect-like construct, its steel carapace reflecting the dying light. It hovered in place for a moment, scanning the ruins with an artificial patience. The warrior held his breath, willing himself to be still. A single shot would bring more. Fenrir growled low in his throat, a sound barely audible but charged with meaning. The drone tilted slightly, its optical sensors flaring red as it detected movement. Too late. The warrior moved with practiced speed, raising his rifle and firing a single round into the drone's sensor cluster. It sputtered, spasming midair before crashing into the rubble with a metallic shriek. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, Fenrir exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his fur as if shedding tension. The warrior lowered his weapon, stepping toward the fallen machine. He crouched beside it, running a gloved hand over its insignia, a faded sigil of the old world's military. A grim smile pulled at his lips. Even now, long after the war, its ghost still roamed. Then he saw it, a blinking light on the drone's casing, a distress beacon. He cursed under his breath, grabbing Fenrir's scruff and pulling him back as the signal pulsed, sending out a silent cry to whatever still listened in this dead world. They had minutes, maybe less, before reinforcements arrived. Then, cutting through the static, a voice crackled in his earpiece, faint, broken, desperate. Survivors trapped need help. The signal was weak, barely clinging to life. A distress call buried within the drone's transmission, a last-ditch plea from someone on the edge of oblivion. The warrior's jaw tightened. He had no reason to respond. People lied. Traps were common. The wasteland did not reward kindness. But Fenrir was staring at him, ears pricked, waiting. The warrior exhaled, glancing at the coordinates embedded in the signal. Not far. A ruined outpost, once a military stronghold, now just another skeleton in the dust. You should walk away. Instead, he reloaded his rifle. Let's move, he muttered, and Fenrir fell in a step beside him. The outpost loomed in the distance, half swallowed by time and ruin. Its walls, once reinforced steel and concrete, had crumbled under the weight of war and neglect. The wind carried the acrid scent of burned-out machinery, the ghost of old battles lingering in the air. The warrior and Fenrir approached cautiously, keeping low as they neared the perimeter. The distress signal had led them here, but silence greeted them now. No movement, no sign of life. Just the skeletal remains of a forgotten war. The warrior felt the weight of his rifle against his shoulder, his grip firm. A trap was still the most likely outcome. Fenrir growled low in his throat, his ears twitching. A warning. The warrior followed his gaze to a rusted barricade, where something shifted in the shadows. Before he could react, figures emerged, half-starved, hollow-eyed survivors clad in mismatched armor. Their weapons were old, scavenged, but held with the grip of desperation. Hands where we can see them, one of them barked. A woman, her face streaked with grime, a rifle trembling in her grasp. The warrior didn't move. His gaze flicked across them. 5 in total, wounded, exhausted, wary. Their eyes lingered on Fenrir, suspicion flickering into fear. A beast like him didn't belong to wanderers or scavengers. He was a weapon, and weapons had owners. "We picked up your distress signal," the warrior said evenly. The woman's jaw tightened. "We sent that 2 days ago. No one came. We thought." Her voice trailed off, but the unspoken words hung between them. "We thought we were already dead." The warrior lowered his rifle slightly, but not enough to be a mistake. "You said you were trapped." One of the others, a younger man with a makeshift bandage around his arm, spat onto the ground. "We are, and now so are you." Before the warrior could respond, Fenrir tensed, his lips peeling back in a silent snarl. A second later, the ground trembled with a distant, mechanical rumble. The warrior recognized the sound instantly. Drones. Big ones. Asterisk, asterisk. The woman swore under her breath. "Damn it. They're early." From beyond the ruined outpost, silhouettes emerged. Hulking machines of war, their plated limbs glinting in the dim light. Quadrupedal, reinforced with armor scavenged from the fallen armies of the past, they moved with an eerie precision, red optics scanning for movement. The warrior shifted, his instincts flaring. "How many?" The woman's face hardened. "Too many." The machines advanced without urgency, calculating the inevitability of their victory. The survivors had nowhere left to run. The warrior had seen this before, an old tactic. The machines didn't waste resources if they didn't have to. They would surround the outpost, herd their prey into a killing zone, and finish them with ruthless efficiency. These weren't mindless automatons. They were hunters. Fenrir's growl deepened, his hackles rising. The warrior's grip tightened on his weapon. He could leave. No attachments, no debts. He owed these people nothing. But Fenrir was watching him again, silent and waiting. The woman's voice cut through the tension. "You brought that thing here, you fight with us." A demand, not a plea. The warrior exhaled. A fight against this many machines was suicide, but there had never really been a choice. "Then we hold," he said. They moved fast, positioning themselves behind the barricades, old wreckage, anything that could be used for cover. The warrior checked his ammo, counting rounds, measuring time. Fenrir crouched low beside him, his eyes locked onto the approaching machines. The first shots rang out. The younger man fired too early, his shot sparking uselessly against the drone's reinforced plating. The warrior cursed under his breath, wasted ammunition. Then the machines retaliated. A barrage of energy fire lit up the battlefield, searing through rusted metal, turning cover into little more than brittle slag. The survivors ducked low, returning fire in controlled bursts, but it wasn't enough. The drones adapted, shifting their formations, pressing forward. Then Fenrir moved. He leapt from cover with terrifying speed, a blur of dark fur and metal. The first machine barely had time to register his presence before his jaws clamped down on its neck, his cybernetics enhancing the force of the bite. Metal crunched, servos screamed, and the drone collapsed in a heap of sparking ruin. The warrior took advantage of the chaos, firing a precise shot through the optics of another machine. It staggered, recalibrating, but not before Fenrir was on it, claws raking through exposed wiring. The battle blurred into motion, gunfire, growls, the whine of failing machines. But for every drone that fell, another took its place. The woman beside him screamed as a bolt of plasma caught her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. The warrior grabbed her by the collar, dragging her behind cover as another blast melted the spot where she had stood. They were losing. The drones adapted too quickly, overwhelming them with precision and patience. The warrior reloaded, counting his last few rounds. Across the battlefield, Fenrir panted, his fur singed, blood, machine and otherwise, dripping from his claws. He wouldn't last much longer. The warrior made his decision. "Fall back," he ordered. "Get inside." The younger man hesitated. "That won't." "Now." There was no argument in his tone. The survivors scrambled toward the remains of the outpost, dragging the wounded with them. The warrior covered their retreat, firing calculated shots, slowing the machine's advance. Then he turned to Fenrir. The wolf was breathing heavily, his body trembling with exertion, but he was ready, waiting. The warrior clenched his jaw. "Go with them." Fenrir's ears flattened. He didn't move. Damn stubborn animal. The warrior took a step forward, lowering his voice. "Protect them." It was an order. Fenrir hesitated, then snarled in frustration before turning, bounding after the retreating survivors. The warrior exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Then he turned back toward the battlefield. The drones had recalibrated, their optics burning like soulless embers. He was alone now, just how he had always fought best. His grip tightened around his weapon. He would give them time. The warrior moved like a shadow through the ruins, breath steady, rifle held firm against his shoulder. The drones, methodical in their pursuit, adjusted their formation, shifting with eerie synchronization. Their red optics pulsed like hungry embers, scanning for any sign of movement. The battlefield was quiet now, the chaos of the earlier fight distilled into something colder, something inevitable. He had given the survivors their chance. Now, he had to make sure they could use it. A flicker of motion, a drone rounding the corner, its rifle arm locking onto him. He dropped to a knee and fired, the round punching through its sensor cluster before it could react. It collapsed in a shower of sparks, limbs twitching uselessly. But the shot had given away his position. The others turned, the air filled with plasma fire. The warrior moved fast, weaving between broken walls and rusted vehicles, using every inch of cover the ruins offered. The heat from the blast scorched the edges of his armor, the acrid smell of burning metal thick in the air. He reached the remains of a toppled comm tower, pressed his back against the cold steel, and reloaded with practiced speed. A low growl. "Fenrir." The warrior turned his head sharply, catching sight of the wolf crouched on the ledge of a broken rooftop, panting hard. His fur was scorched, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with defiance. He had disobeyed. Stubborn animal. The warrior exhaled through his nose. There was no time to argue. A new sound filled the air, deeper than the drones, heavier. A rhythmic pounding, each step rattling the earth. Then it emerged from the dust. A war machine unlike the others, twice their size, its armor reinforced with overlapping plates, its glowing core pulsing like a heartbeat. This was not just another drone. This was the Watcher. The last remnants of the old war had given rise to things like this. Machines designed not just to kill, but to endure, to adapt, to wipe the last embers of humanity from the wasteland. Fenrir tensed. The warrior raised his rifle. The Watcher studied them with cold intelligence. Its targeting systems locked on. A voice, mechanical yet almost human, crackled through its speakers. Outdated model. Organic components inefficient. Correction. Terminate. It fired. The warrior threw himself sideways as the blast obliterated the tower behind him. Shards of steel and concrete rained down, cutting into his armor. He hit the ground hard, rolling into cover. His rifle was gone, torn from his grip. Fenrir moved first. He launched from the rooftop, a streak of black fur and metal. His claws scraped against the Watcher's armored plating as he landed on its back, teeth bared. He bit down, trying to tear into the machine's exposed wiring. The Watcher reacted instantly, shifting its weight, slamming into the ground to crush the wolf beneath it. Fenrir yelped. The warrior's body moved before his mind did. He ran toward them, hands fumbling for the last explosive charge strapped to his belt. The Watcher loomed over Fenrir now, its cannons charging for the killing blow. The warrior leapt. He landed hard against the machine's side, fingers gripping onto an exposed panel just beneath its core. His free hand slammed the explosive into place. The Watcher's optics flared as it recalculated the threat. Error. Proximity critical. It shifted, trying to shake him loose. The warrior gritted his teeth, wrapping an arm around one of its stabilizers to hold on. He met Fenrir's gaze for a split second. Then he did what had to be done. He wrenched the trigger free. The blast tore through the Watcher's core, white-hot fire bursting from its seams. The force of the explosion sent the warrior flying, the impact slamming him into the wreckage of an old vehicle. His vision blurred, pain stabbing through every nerve. He forced himself up, blinking through the smoke. The Watcher was down. Its body twitched, its optics flickering, but it was finished. But Fenrir, the wolf, lay motionless amidst the debris. The warrior dragged himself forward, lungs burning, hands shaking as he reached for his companion. He pressed a hand against Fenrir's side. No movement. The cybernetic plating was shattered, his breathing shallow. No. The warrior clenched his jaw, his hands balling into fists. He had lost too much already. This world had taken everything from him. His people, his home, his future. But not this. Not Fenrir. A faint noise. A breath. Fenrir's eyes fluttered open, glazed but alive. Relief crashed over the warrior like a tidal wave. He exhaled, pressing his forehead briefly against Fenrir's, the closest thing to an embrace he could offer. The wolf let out a weak, rumbling sound, something between a growl and a sigh. Stubborn, just like his master. The survivors emerged from the ruins, their faces drawn with exhaustion and disbelief. The woman, her wounded arm clutched against her chest, stared at the wreckage of the Watcher, then at the warrior. "You should be dead." The warrior shrugged, brushing dust from his armor. "Not today." The young man took a cautious step forward. "That thing, it was hunting us. It would have never stopped." His voice wavered. "You killed it." The warrior said nothing. He simply knelt beside Fenrir, carefully lifting the wolf onto his shoulders. The fight was over, but the war was not. The woman stepped forward, holding something out to him. A data drive, old and worn, but still functional. "This was in the outpost," she said. "I don't know what's on it, but it has the same insignia as your wolf. Might tell you where he came from." The warrior hesitated. Then he took it, slipping it into his belt without a word. He turned away from the ruins, his steps slow but steady. Fenrir stirred weakly on his back, his breathing shallow but persistent. The road ahead was uncertain, as it had always been. But for now, they had one. And that was enough.